Welcome to this first Sunday in Advent. It may look a little different, and it may feel a little different, but our hope remains the same. Our hope in Jesus remains sure. This Sunday, we are moving into our sermon series in John. And we are going to see John's take on life, John's take on existence, John's take on the reason for hope. Even though today does not seem, for many, like a normal Advent, I believe that John's passage today will remind us that we still have that same hope. So please open your Bibles to John 1. Jesus is life. I believe that title accurately reflects John's message. And pardon me as I have some technical difficulties. This is why you should never preach off an old iPad. But we'll get it figured out in a moment here.
Wait for technology to catch up to the scripture.
Exactly. Thank you. Okay. Well, here's what we're going to do. While my iPad catches up, we are going to read our passage today. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from John. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children not born of natural descent, nor human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made its dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, "This is the one who I spoke about when I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me, because he was before me.' Out of his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known." Some of you come to this service or are viewing this service, and you've put your hope in Jesus. You've put your faith in Jesus, and that's your hope. Some of you here, you've done that, but you're not seeing the reason for hope, and you're not feeling it. And some of you are still waiting for something worth putting your hope in. and you don't know where it's found. Some of you don't believe there's a reason for hope. And all of you are going to hear from John today, and you're going to hear from me, and I'm going to encourage you that there is a reason for hope. I want to share with you out of John my reason for hope, that there is a reason, and it is there, and it's for this life, it's for now, and it impacts eternity. Let's take one moment just to ask God that he opens our hearts and our minds to this passage and his truth. Father in heaven, I pray that you would open our eyes and open our hearts, open our minds to the things, the true things that you have to say, Lord, that rub us the wrong way, Lord, that highlight and bring out the darkness that is in us, Lord, lack of faith, Father, a lack of hope. Please work in our hearts. Help us to hear your words, and through your Spirit, may we know the truth. In Jesus' name, amen. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You know, this passage, in this passage, verses 1 and 14, they're very similar in nature, in subject. Verse 14 says, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Verses 1 to 14 act as kind of bookends for this passage, and they give a backdrop and context to everything in this passage. And so we need to read it in light of that. This word that existed in the beginning, that it was God, that is God, and that came in the flesh, that we've seen his glory, and he came to reveal the Father, full of grace and truth. That is the context and the backdrop of everything in verses 1 to 14, and really extending to 18. These two verses are all about the Word, who he is, what he is, and why he is. And they come to us, and as we read it, and we see that the Word, that in the beginning was the Word, it should remind us of Genesis. It should remind us of the beginning, that before time, before creation, that the Word existed with God, as God. And that he's not a created thing. He doesn't have a beginning. He gives beginning. He gives life to everything. He is uncreated. He is outside, and he is the creator of everything. The Word that was God, the Word that is God, somehow at the same time, he became flesh. And spoiler alert, in verse 29, we read that that's Jesus. That's Jesus. The Word is Jesus. That's what the author of this book says. It's not a conclusion that we jump to. That's what John says. To oversimplify it, Jesus and the Word are the same thing. So when you hear those words, we're talking about the same thing. And this is one passage many Christians use to talk about the Trinity, to understand the Trinity, to defend it and explain it. But it's much bigger than that. If what John is saying is true, then life, as described by John, begins and ends with Jesus. And a relationship with Jesus is our pathway for meaning, purpose, identity, and relationship. If Jesus is the beginning and the end of life and the essence of it, he is all of those things. And life and meaning are found in Jesus alone. He is sufficient to give life meaning. This may sound like a bold statement for this passage, but what we have to understand is that John is using loaded language here. He is using loaded words and phrases. Not only that, but you can only catch the meaning of what he's saying when you read and then reread John. And to give an example of this, or a few examples, At first, when you read John, and John says, in the beginning, it sounds like he's talking about creation. It sounds like Genesis, and it should remind us of that. But he's talking about more than that. He's talking about new life, that he is the creator of a new life. And Jesus gives us new life. When John talks about life in this verse, he's talking about more than the ability to create life and give us animation, right? He's talking about the cause that springs us into being and that gives us salvation. John is also talking about salvation. And when John talks about light, he means more than the light that came into being at creation. He's also talking about revelation and truth and more. And so when you find yourself asking in John, well, what do you mean? Most of the time he's talking about both. He means both. And it's important when we read John to know that, because otherwise we're kind of torn trying to choose between one or the other. So meaning found in Jesus. What does that mean, that meaning is found in Jesus? Well, let's take a look again at verses 1 to 2. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. So we know that Jesus is the pre-incarnate. We know that the Word is the pre-incarnate Jesus, but he's more than that. In John's day, this word, logos, that's the Greek word for word, it meant something so much more. It was loaded language back then. And what John was talking about was reason. He was talking about the reason, the logic, the purpose for existence. All of those things are bound up in this. And the word logos itself doesn't just mean a single word. It can, but it also means the full message. Jesus is the full message, the full disclosure. And that's the way many people understood that word back then. People talked about this. They wanted to know who they were, why they were, what are we here for, what's life's all about, and essentially, who am I? What was I made for? What is this life for? In Jesus' day, culture was looking for the meaning of life, the reason for existence. And people, especially philosophers, they wanted to find this. They wanted to find humanity's potential and their purpose. And on that, pastor and scholar Tim Keller says, only when a human being realizes potential do we finally find what we're built for. And we become everything we're supposed to be. And I think we all resonate with that. We all want that. For a youth, someone comes and asks you, what are you going to be when you grow up? You're like, man, I don't know. I wish I knew. Pick one, engineer, right? And so we're kind of forced to pick one. But you know what? That doesn't just go away. That continues on. But John is saying Jesus is the reason, the meaning, and the purpose behind and in life. The problem is people back then, they were really essentially like us. I mean, we haven't changed so much from how they were. People kind of had begun to give up. They thought, well, we can't find that. We don't think we can know what that is. And so what they did is they gave up. They gave up looking. We just can't know it. And they started to live for other things. They started to live for their own pleasure. Or they started to live, if it wasn't that, there was a nobler group of people who started to live for morality, goodness, virtues. And they started to live for that. Because in a world where you can't find meaning, you can't find purpose, well, you have to manufacture it. You have to build it. But the problem is it's a false construct. It's artificial. If Jesus isn't the Word, if he isn't the reason, and if like most of our atheist friends think, if there is no cause, then there is no meaning to relationships. It's just a false construct. There is no truth. It's just a false construct. It's just something that we build so that our society can thrive, and in the end, it's going to fade into nothing, and it's meaningless. That's reality if you don't have Jesus as your reason. And so John begs us to ask this question: is Jesus your reason? Is Jesus your reason? Is he your purpose? Is he your meaning? Is he your life? Or have you put your purpose and your life and your meaning and all of those things, and you've just temporarily tried to be content with pleasure, or be content with creating your own morality and your own structures to provide meaning to your existence and hope to your existence? Perhaps your hope, your reason for living, is the vaccine that everybody desperately wants, and an end to this COVID environment. Perhaps that's your hope. And it's looming so large on the horizon for you that it's eclipsed your hope in Jesus. And you're satisfied with this Band-Aid that would be wonderful, but it's not our hope in life. Perhaps your hope in life is a healthy family, a healthy economy, which again would be wonderful short-term blessings, but they are not our reason for existing. Our reason for existing is bound up in who Jesus is. Perhaps it's a special relationship. And we all crave relationship. We all want someone to love us. We all want someone to know us. We all want someone to share our experiences with, our passions with. We all desperately want that. And, when I was a lot younger, I thought that would be found when I got married. I thought, well, my meaning, my relational meaning is going to be found in my wife, and she's just going to want to hear every word that's in my mind, and I'm a bit of a talker, so that wore out pretty quick. But that's what I really believed. And if you're young and you think that, if you think that a boyfriend or a girlfriend is going to give you meaning, that one day getting married is going to give you the meaning that you're missing now, it won't. It's a wonderful blessing from God, but it is not intended to give you that meaning. Jesus is your meaning. He is your reason. And so we need, as a people, to know that and to get a grip on that. As John says, Jesus is the meaning and the reason. We see this, and John unpacks it further, but if we look at John 1:1-2 again, that we see that the Word was, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. What does it mean for the Word to be with God in the beginning? John describes it in verse 18. And we already know it affirms Jesus' existence as God. But have you ever thought about Jesus' existence with God for eternity? Eternity past? John explains this in verse 18 by saying, "No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known." The NIV says that Jesus is in closest relationship with the Father. In the beginning, Jesus existed in relationship with the Father that was as close as you could get. And it's quite beyond our comprehension, but we're going to give it a shot. And we're going to look at the NASB's translation. It's an extremely literal translation, and it says, Jesus is in the bosom of the Father. Jesus is in the bosom of the Father. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, who is in the bosom of the Father, has explained him. The ESV says Jesus was at the Father's side. And so this is a word picture, friends. This is a word picture for how close the Word was with God. This word picture describes absolute intimacy, honesty, vulnerability, self-disclosure. There's no hiding here. And this is in part what 1 John means, where it says that in God there's no darkness. There's no hiding. There's no dishonesty. It's a beautiful picture. This is a picture of life, of existence, and it's open and transparent and honest, not where one is dominant at the other's expense. This is a picture of the Trinity. But it's not just a picture of the Trinity. It's the first glimpse of what life looks like. When you think about that, that is the essence of life. Before creation, that is the essence of perfect existence. It's perfect relational harmony, not at the expense of others, but to showcase and love the other. Like, what a beautiful picture of relationship, life, eternal existence. And I love that, because if you hear great music and you hear harmony, one harmony isn't there to dominate the music. It's there to show off and to rub the right way with the other notes. And it's beautiful. And that's kind of what we see with Jesus existing with God as the Word for eternity. And right after that, out of that relationship, that perfect relationship, in verse 3, the Word creates everything. And if you read in some of the Proverbs, you see wisdom described as creating everything. And you can go down that rabbit trail in your own study, but it's described as rejoicing, that creation for the Word was rejoicing in all that God was doing. And so this beautiful passage ought to cause us to say, I want that. If that is the picture of life, if that is the picture of perfect life and existence, I want that. I want to know God relationally, intimately, harmoniously, where I am glorifying Him and His grace is flowing to me. I want to be transparent with Him. And I want to be transparent with His creation, those who He's put around me in relationship to me and with me. I want to exist in that kind of relationship. It is in fact God's triune relationship that gives us context to all other relationships. Our relationship to God gives us context for all our other relationships. And without that kind of relationship with God, with Jesus as the beginning and the end, all of our other relationships cease to have meaning. They are temporary constructs, once again, temporary phenomenon that ultimately mean nothing. Without Jesus, that is where we're left. But when you know Jesus, all other relationships have context. They have healthy boundaries. They have love. This relationship ought to cause us to reflect that to others. And that's exactly why Jesus came. He came to disclose that, to disclose God. The one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known. Jesus came to make him known and that relationship known and what that looks like. He came to heal our broken relationships, to satisfy the deepest relational needs we have, not just with others, thankfully, but with God himself. Jesus is the reason for living, and he is the only thing that can satisfy your soul. Life as described by John's gospel is relating to God rightly, openly, honestly, and vulnerably. It is the eternal satisfaction and fulfillment that comes from knowing and being known by God. And it flows into everything we know and everything we do, all of our relationships and all of creation. You can be alive and not have this kind of life. John makes that clear. That you can have an animated body and be self-conscious, and you can live life and not have true life. This is true life, knowing Jesus. This is the life that existed in the beginning. But it's also the life and the light that was rejected by the religious Jews who claimed they already knew God. If Jesus for you, if your hope in Jesus stops at heaven, then you're missing out. If your relationship and your hope in Jesus stops at just getting to heaven, and you think that that's all Jesus is about and all the relationship with Jesus is about, then you just don't understand that Jesus is all in all. And he's a person, and he wants to have a relationship with you, and he came so that you could have that with him. And it's a daily life thing, and it's here for you now. Friends, in a dark and for many a hopeless time of history right now, Jesus is life. He's the Logos. He's the logic. He's the reason behind it all. Tim Keller asks, is he your Logos? Is he the priority? Is he the priority point? Is he your personal reference? Your main reference point in all your decisions? Is living for his pleasure and honor your greatest pleasure and honor? Is he what you're living for, your highest priority in your life?